I did an experiment to see if what I thought was bad was disturbance or second force, and I found that that was so. And it also showed up that Mindy acts on the ideal that she is created and that the world she lives in is also created. Just doesn't work and needs to be fixed.
I didn't understand that.
Well, I saw that I had ideals about how self was supposed to act. The only way those ideals made, the ideal was when something disturbs me, I should see it as second force and it should be okay. It shouldn't bother me. And I saw that that wasn't true, that it did bother me, and that I also saw the idea that if I was already created, then I should be able to act differently.
Well, it's not surprising, sweetheart, because that means that seeing second force didn't become real. I mean, you quickly say, I saw that things that disturbed me are second force, and then go on to a bunch of conclusions. Was there a willingness to just spend a week looking at creation? Or did I feel a need to do something else? How are you going to really get something if you just see it a little bit and then say, okay, that's enough. Move on. What would be so bad about spending 1 week with one thing? It's not like it's stopping you from doing anything else in your life. It's not like it's creating a huge problem.
Right.
So what would be the problem with just spending a week looking at that one thing? So let's just go back to second force. What did you see?
That I was initiating working in a group with people, and that when they didn't approve of me, that was part of second force. That was second force.
How do you know?
Because it seemed to be showing areas where there was weakness in that being okay.
What being okay?
That I disturbed them, that the behavior of Mindy disturbed these people.
Then how do you know it's second force?
Because it seemed to be in the way of, seemed to be an obstruction to working in a group. But I guess only if it was an ideal that it had to be a certain way.
What is second force?
Something that resists what I initiate.
And then?
And then I keep initiating it.
And then?
And then eventually there's a form that gets created.
Then how do I know it's second force if I don't see the form and I don't see the result? The second force is just an idea unless I see the whole thing, isn't it?
Right. The whole thing's not there yet.
Well, that's what I just said. Then how do you know it's second force?
I don't.
Then this example is not very useful for seeing second force, is it?
Right.
But it was enough to move on. Ah, I saw it. But you didn't see it. You didn't see it as the second force of creation. So it's still not real, is it?
No.
But it was okay to move on.
Okay.
Isn't that odd?
Yeah.
If I'm going to learn a new thing, and someone says, in order to understand the next thing, you need to understand this, then why am I moving on? good, because it sure didn't make sense to me. Was that basically it? Working in a group?
Yeah.
Okay. You can't turn that light down.
No, it's just
It's
in
a
the
three-way fall. Anybody else? Any results from experimentation? Did anybody do anything?
I didn't.
No?
The best I could do is recognize some nod eyes and some disturbance that I was resisting. That's the best I did this week.
How come?
I'm caught up in my life. I'm distracted by the things that I do all the time.
Okay. So how do we move on?
I have to work really hard.
What do you mean?
Pardon?
What do you mean work really hard?
I have to really work hard at looking at my behavior instead of being distracted by everything in my life.
Last week we just asked to look at the forces of creation and try and see second force. It's just one simple thing for last week.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I said for last week it was just one simple thing, to look at the four forces and to see the second force as part of creating something. Not that it really had anything to do with looking at behavior, necessarily. But
It's hard for me.
I don't know what that means. I don't know what it's hard for me means.
I think about what I learn here, but then I'm distracted by my life, and I can't hold on to what I'm hearing here.
Okay.
I appreciate it while I'm here. I think about it. I feel like I'm learning, but my life takes me away, and it's just out of my mind.
So what did you do with your experimenting this week, Mike?
Concentrating on work, getting work.
No. What did you do with your experimenting with teaching ideas?
Well, to me, that was like second force to me. Initiating, find a job, and then right now I'm just in the process. I haven't done the interview, but I did feel what seemed like a second force, resisting to do that, but I haven't. That's as far as I got with that.
Okay. About you?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was more, I was letting some of the nod eyes that were speaking to me, just letting them come in and trying to observe them.
No, I asked a very specific question, and I know you were here when I asked it. What did you do to experiment with the forces of creation and see second force as a force of creation? It was a very specific question. Nothing. Is that the answer?
I think so.
What's that?
Yeah.
That's the answer. Nothing. So does anybody want to throw anything in or no? really like having to sit here and poll everybody. That puts me in a rock position. What do you want to do? There's nothing else to say. Is that what all the silence means?
I don't have anything to say.
Okay. Well, I don't feel comfortable going on. This stuff is all very concrete to me. It's all very real. It's not ideas. I know that one is used to living in the imagination where concepts are more important than real things. But I don't see any way that we can build on a foundation that doesn't exist. If I go on talking, then all we're doing is constructing an imaginary place to live. And I'd like it to be real. Does that make sense? So I guess about all we can perhaps do is just maybe look at what we can do to experiment with the four forces and say that's what we're going to do this week. Otherwise, this is just an imaginary thing. And we presented a lot of theories, a lot of concepts in the last 2 weeks. To use them, we have to make them more than just theory. So I don't see any way to move beyond this point. So I think perhaps what would be useful to do now would be to say, what am I going to do this week to experiment with this? Come up with an aim, an experiment, and say, I'm going to spend the week doing this and see what I see. Okay?
It would help me to have something more concrete.
I didn't say I was going to give it to you.
I didn't say you were either.
Oh, okay. I'm saying, let's do that. Not, I'm going to give it to you. So what would be some ways that I could do that? Experiment to see the four forces so they're not a theory to me anymore. They're a perceived fact. Kind of like gravity. You don't theorize about gravity, do you? You don't sit and have to consider theories about gravity and do extensive calculations every time you do something, do you? It's just a fact that you take into account because it's part of the way you see the world. Wouldn't it be interesting to have the forces of creation be a fact that's perceived that you just take into account as you do things, rather than a theory that you have to sort of like think about? See, that's where we want to get to. Where the four forces are just as real as gravity, which is just as invisible, isn't it? I've never seen gravity. I've only seen its effects. Isn't that right? But it's very real to me.
I was thinking this week that those cards I made, remember those business cards I made?
Yeah.
They were too easy. I didn't have enough resistance. It was all very easy. Just pick a picture, mail it in with a check, and you get your cards back. And the cards were not that great.
No, they're not the form you wanted, are they?
I think I needed a little more resistance. Looking for a little bit better printer and maybe fussing over it a little more.
But the other side of the coin is that you intentionally took the path of least resistance.
I wanted to see a result because I tend to procrastinate. I stand up like...
So let's repeat that again because it wasn't heard. It was interpreted.
Repeat what?
You intentionally took the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm thinking about
That's
that.
what you said. That's what you told me as you described that event to me. I did everything the easiest way possible. Anytime I was presented with a choice, I took the one that took the least amount of effort.
And now I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand that. I just wanted to make sure that it was seen that that was what I did. It wasn't just something that happened. Okay?
I gotta try finding a better.
So what can we do to experiment with this, to start seeing it as much as possible?
Well, you could do 4 little columns. In the first column, you could put initiative, what I tried to initiate.
Well, no, don't put what you tried to initiate.
No?
Initiative is something I do, it's not something I try to do.
Okay. So you could put initiative, second force, resistance, form, and result, and just try to track them. Once you've got your handful of initiatives down there that you can...
Yeah, it would
easier to
probably be
notice.
a tad easier to do it by them rather than by forces. Because they do get spread out over a lot of time.
Right. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't necessarily see your form that day or
Right.
the result.
So it might be easier to just keep track of some of the things I'm doing and watch if they go
Uh-huh.
through those steps. You could do that.
Yeah.
Try and see what the initiative was, write it down, what's the resistance, what's the form, and what's the outcome. That would be a way to do it.
Greater resistance doesn't always result in a better result, does it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If I went out and deliberately looked for more resistance on a project, it wouldn't necessarily mean I would get a better result.
Resistance is supplied from outside of you. If you're trying to create resistance and you're initiating something again, aren't you? Initiative comes from you. I don't believe that I make my own second force. It just sort of is supplied. So yeah, if I tried to do it the hardest way possible, that probably wouldn't be any better than doing it the easiest way. Both of them would probably be kind of screwy. Okay. There's a difference between the easiest way possible and taking the path of least resistance. Okay, those are not the same statement, although we think they are because we don't know about second force. To us, they're the same statement, right? They're not. Nothing wrong with doing something the easiest way possible, if you understand the 4 forces. And don't think that means take the path of least resistance. So what are some other ways that I could experiment with this? That I could begin to observe it?
Well, it seems to me that the resistance is the most obvious in my life. I usually notice that before anything else. Should be grateful for the resistance and observe what goes on.
But how can I be grateful for something if I don't know that it's the second force of creation? That's an intellectual exercise. That's exactly what I don't want to do.
Okay.
If I see for a fact that resistance is a part of creating something, then I wouldn't have to work at gratitude, would I?
Oh. Oh, okay.
That's the hard way to do it. That's what she's struggling with.
Right, right.
She says, my life carries me away. Well, it's no surprise. Because I don't have another point of view that makes it anything but a bunch of second force that I have to take care of. Your idea, by the way, is not bad. It's just that you're leaping to the end result because you're claiming to already understand it. There's something you could do in that if you didn't think you knew the outcome, which is not experimenting. An experiment says, I don't know the outcome.
Right.
You're predicting the outcome. It's not an experiment. There is something you could do with that idea, though, if you would not think in terms of I know the outcome. So what else? Can anybody think of anything that they could do to experiment with this? No, just pipe up. I don't feel like playing group leader.
Well, I was just thinking of something. I'm getting ready to go to court for visitation to see my children. I was thinking about taking the least resistant path, now that you brought that up. I'm just, giving in to her requests, but there are some things that I'd like to try to get out of, like phone visitation and some different things, and I was just thinking that would be a good experiment to go in and on that concept of maybe not taking the least resistant path, but trying to get a little more out of it than just succumbing to her, what she wants the terms to be. And then I can see.
How is that an experiment, Mike? Isn't that trying to use an idea that to me is not yet real? Which I have no problems with, that's fine. By all means, go ahead and do that.
That's the best my mind can conceive as an experiment.
By all means, go ahead. Okay? Let's see if we can come up with a practical experiment I can do a little bit more often than that. Okay? Go ahead and use the theory, even though you don't know if it's true. That's fine. I have no problems with that. But that's what you're doing, okay? Is using a theory before it's known to be a fact, which is okay.
I was thinking of using it in very simple terms and to try and disprove it and see if I can make a meal without resistance, or, you know, make some project or do a portfolio or something physical so it becomes more real to me. If I can actually do that, or if there's always resistance to it, if there's an outcome. I'm just kind of watching the amount of resistance and what happens with it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Let's not get too carried away with this idea of trying to disprove it, meaning that I have to work at proving it wrong. One way to try to disprove something is just to observe all the time, looking for a fact that contradicts. I don't have to set out to disprove it. I do an experiment with that idea and observe. Okay? The idea behind trying to disprove it is that I don't believe it before I prove it. Then I won't even look for a fact that contradicts.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean setting up odd, bizarre things to try to prove it wrong necessarily. Okay, just pay attention. Don't stop paying attention because you assume that this is right. But that's fine. One could do that. One could take certain projects that are finished in short periods of time and pay very close attention to them. That's another way I could experiment with this, isn't it? The big problem with this is that so many things take a long time that it's hard to see it. So we have one suggestion for things that take a long period of time, which is to take notes over that period of time. So in essence, I've collapsed it into something that can be seen. Another thing is to take short things, where you get from initiative to result pretty quickly, like cooking a meal. And pay attention. And say, can I see what's happening here in light of the four forces? Do they really describe what's going on? There's value in both of those, isn't there? Looking at a short project from that point of view may lead me to see some things, and looking at it from a longer point of view may lead me to see some things. And they become very real by doing both of those, not just one or the other. Isn't that right? What else?
Possibly do several short experiments regarding the four forces, and then compare them.
We just said that. You've got a week. I suspect in a week, lots of short experiments, can't you? You can probably do 16 a day if you like. You could probably even do 50 a day. There are lots of things that we do that don't take very long, isn't that right? How long does it take to take a piss? You can do that one
Depends on how bad I have to
several times a day.
go.
What?
I'm joking. I said it depends on how many bad I have to go.
Yeah, so the difference is 15 seconds or 45 seconds. Wow, that's significant. How long does it take?
I get your point.
I mean, if you decide that you want to look at short-term things from that point of view, you have the opportunity all day long. Okay. I still think there's some value to her idea, which is to look at some longer-term things as well. You may learn something in those two ways of looking at things that might not be evident by looking at just one thing. So, doing both. And that doesn't disturb what I'm doing. I'm still doing the same things that I've always done. It's just there's an inner thing going on at the same time. I'm paying attention to something. Right? It doesn't disturb anything I'm doing. It doesn't prevent me from living my life. It just means I'm watching for something. Are there any other ideas?
Would it be a good idea to see the different kinds of resistance? Observing that?
Well, that may happen if you do the other two things. But if you don't do the two that have been suggested so far, I don't know if you'll see any second force at all, other than as an idea. We don't have to come up with another. I'm just asking, does anyone have another? I'm not saying we have to.
Would it be worthwhile to, I mean, going on the assumption that in general resistance pisses me off, to work backwards from when I'm pissed off and to try to see it that way?
I think there would be tremendous value in that. That's what she didn't see. Is to look at those moments when something disturbs me and say, is this second force to something? Did I just initiate something and is this second force to it? And then become aware of the whole process instead of that one little moment when I'm pissed off. I think that would be really valuable, in fact. And it's actually going to be one of the recommendations that this one was going to make, and now it's not necessary. Okay. Can I see that relationship between the things that disturb me about living and see it as the second force in a process of creation? I might see things in a whole different way if I did that. So now we have 3 experiments we can do. Now you're welcome to make up any more that you like. I think that's probably enough to occupy you. If you want to make up more, feel absolutely free, but at least that gives us some things we can do. Perhaps if I did that for a week or maybe even a couple of weeks or as long as it takes, these ideas would not be a theory to me anymore. If I spent 1 week paying attention to this, it might not be a theory anymore. It might well be a reality to me. I know that one wants to do a lot. But the fact is, I suspect if you try to do a lot, you end up doing, guess what? Nothing. Why don't you spend a week doing this? Just that one little experiment, you know, these 3 different ways. Just one thing. So it becomes very real to me. Then when we move on, there'll never be a question anymore about this idea. Isn't that right? Maybe I may have to take 2 or 3 weeks. Who knows? I may have to take the rest of my life if I do it only a little bit occasionally when I feel like it. Okay. Questions, comments?
So what we look for as initiative could be something as simple as, I need to study.
That's not an initiative. That's an idea.
Taking an idea and making it initiative by doing it and seeing,
Right. Doing it is initiative.
and then seeing the resistance to doing that, and then watching the form and the result. And it could be as simple as trying to study for a class.
No, if you're trying to study, then you're not studying, so you're not even initiating. It's all in your head. It hasn't even become initiative yet.
So everything I do, taking a walk, is initiative. Everything I do is an initiative I can watch the resistance for. It doesn't have to be a creation of
What do you take
art.
a walk for?
Well, either to get someplace or exercise.
Or do you ever take a walk not because you're supposed to? Don't you ever have any other reason than because I'm supposed to?
Hardly.
That's interesting.
Hardly do anything unless
just
I'm
to enjoy it. I mean, I just got through taking a walk that was for the purpose of going to the store and buying cigarettes. It was for the purpose of enjoyment, and it was for exercise.
All three in one.
I did all three. I'm lazy. So I got cigarettes, and I enjoyed a nice little walk, and I got some exercise. Okay? Don't you ever do anything to enjoy it?
Almost everything I do for my own pleasure.
Odd, you didn't even mention that. It wasn't even one of the motivations, according to you.
Part of the motivation is I should.
Part of it sounds like most of it, like
Yeah.
99%. I didn't walk because I should. I see value in exercise. There's
I try to
nothing
see
it
what I
should.
should do is valuable to me.
I know, it worked great, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I just offered you another way of looking at it. I don't do it because I should. I do it because I do see value in exercise. And if I'm going to exercise, I'm going to mix it up with something of other value to me. So it's not a chore. It was a pleasant experience. Hell, I got company this time. I conned somebody else into going with me.
So who feels foolish?
Huh?
I'm joking, I said who feels foolish in this room?
Probably no one.
Okay.
Because I suspect they enjoyed it too. I'm
course.
good company.
That's it.
I mean, the other side of the coin is we could have driven there. I simply said, do you want to walk to the store? Because I'm not going to drive there. They could have said no and stayed here. At any rate, in order to understand the four forces, I have to know what motivation is. It's not a walk. Okay? It's a walk to get to a certain result. If the result is to get from here to there, fine. And we can see what the second force is. If the result is to get exercise, then we can see what the second force is. It's harder to see it if you're not even paying attention to what the outcome is supposed to be. Okay. I was hoping that you would say that you occasionally walked for enjoyment's sake, because then the second force would be really obvious. We didn't get that one.
Every second.
So we work with what we got. Does that make sense?
You said that if I did something for enjoyment, the second force
Well,
would be...
that's irrelevant because you didn't. No, I just said
Oh,
that
yeah,
because I thought
yeah.
it was funny. I mean, do you understand that I have an anticipated result from taking this walk? Okay. Where's the second force?
It helps to have an understanding of the results that you expect to have in order to observe.
That's what the second force is too. It's your initiative to get to that result. So if I'm not paying attention to what I'm initiating, in other words, very few people initiate a walk. Okay? And then look around about half an hour later and say, gee, I wonder where I am. That would be what happened if you initiated a walk. Isn't that right? With no destination. You'd look around a half hour later and say, where am I? I was just walking. I wasn't going anywhere. And that would have its own second force. But we walk somewhere. Or we walk to get exercise. Or a few of us just walk for the sheer fun of it. But the second force is about what I'm initiating. It's not the walk that I'm initiating, most likely.
It's about the result I want.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
I was thinking, reading backward from the most recent time that I got pissed off. Since it was this morning, I remembered in some detail that, and trying to see, well, what's the resistance there? And what actually happened was, I mean, I did have a purpose, and I totally forgot what it was, and I was pissed off at.
Well,
Yes.
that's one of the things that one can see.
Mm-hmm.
Resisting the resistance destroys the game. That was one of the things that we're talking about. That if I get involved in changing the nature of the initiative to resisting the resistance, I actually become destructive, not creative.
That's exactly what happened.
Okay. So we
Exactly.
can see a new thing about this.
Yeah, and the initiative, I mean, I didn't even remember. I mean, now that you mention this, I go, gee, there was an initiative
There was
way
something
back
I wanted to
somewhere.
do. Yeah. I
And-
forgot. I was so busy yelling at that whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The perspective just goes out the window.
So at this point, in this particular one you're talking about, we didn't even get a form.
No.
We got an entirely new thing that had nothing to do with what I set out to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do get a form. It's not pretty.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it had its own form, and
Well, no,
it's
you
not the one I
started,
intended.
you started initiating something else. So what you got was the form of an argument.
Well, sort of, yeah, whatever it was. Yeah.
You apply it to it.
Right, exactly. I did get a form. It just had no relation to the one I set out to get.
You abandoned the first four forces and started a whole new one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something very valuable to be seen in looking at it from that point too. Because one of the statements we made is that resisting the resistance destroys you and everything around you. Okay? So if I don't see some examples of that, that just becomes a theory to me, and it's pretty, but I don't care. Nice words. If I start seeing what she just said, I might think twice the next time I start resisting resistance. Like, is this really what I want to do?
I suspect that the form is supposed to be obvious, but I don't quite see it.
There's nothing in this world that's supposed to be.
Okay.
that I've ever found.
Okay. Can I give you an example? I had an audition today, so I wanted to get to the audition a couple of hours early to have time to go over the sides. So I initiated getting ready, and it ended up taking more time than I expected, so I got on the road later, and there was traffic, and I got to the audition, and I ended up having 20 minutes or 15 minutes to go over the sides. And I went over the sides, and then I went in and I auditioned, and then I left. But I don't really get what the form was. Was the form that I made it to the audition, or I don't get what the form is. I mean, I guess the result would be whether I got called back or not, but I don't really get what the form was.
Because you think the audition is an end unto itself, which might explain why you often don't get parts.
Okay.
Because you're not trying to get parts, you're trying to get auditions. It's kind of goofy, isn't it? Getting the audition is one small part of a much larger thing, isn't it? And it may have its own four forces that go into it, but it's not the point. You have all four forces there. You have initiative, resistance, and the form, which was 20 minutes early instead of 2. And the result, it's all there. But it's also part of something else, which is trying to get a part, isn't it? Doing what it takes to get a part. Except I think you often forget that. That the point of an audition is not to have an audition. Isn't that right? I don't think you remember that a lot of the time. Which means that you're going to deal with second force in an odd way, because you think that the audition is the thing itself. Whereas in fact, that's just first force and hopefully the beginning of a much larger thing, isn't it? So you attempt to create a successful audition. And so you probably get lots of successful auditions. Not many parts. But I bet you have lots of successful auditions. Make sense? Anything else come up?
Yeah. One of the reasons I didn't do anything is I was busy brooding all week about various stuff going on in my life. And I was brooding about this contradiction in my life between something that I want and what I'm actually getting. And, well, actually it's between just differences between my partner and me, what I want and what he wants, are just natures. And I was thinking of this as just this horrible problem that's, what do? Do you throw this one back in and get another one, you know? And I pretty much knew that wasn't it, but I just saw this as this terrible, unresolvable thing, you know, just a rock in a hard place, instead of seeing that I have as an initiative and a resistance. You know, the fact that this other human being doesn't want every last little thing that I do is just part of life, and the fact that he's a different human being and is inevitable in any relationship with any different human being, you know, and it's just natural resistance to whatever I try to initiate, just as I'm doing the same for him. Only he's a lot more patient with my resistance than I am with his. But I don't know, it's a lot less discouraging to look at it that way. You know, then it can work with somehow. It's not essentially wrong. I've been looking at it going, this is a wrong situation. Right. I'm like, what do? You live with a wrong situation, or you change, or you get out of it. But neither of those is really a nice
Right.
way to live. But it's not
So that's
essentially...
another thing I could do, is just spend a week seeing it as resistance before I even decide what I'm going to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I don't know anything to do about it because I'm not looking at it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So anything I do will work out strange because I'm not seeing it correctly.
Yeah.
So what if I just spend a week trying to see it another way? Looking at it another way, and then I'll decide what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, I believe it would be helpful.
To whom?
Pardon?
To whom?
To this one? If,
Doesn't that sound altruistic? I'm going to offer you something that would be helpful.
oh. Right. It would be helpful to me if you could take an example of initiation, resistance.
That's why I interrupted you. That was so obviously manipulation. Okay? Let me pretend like I'm doing this for the good of everyone.
Oh no, it would help me.
Well, I know we established that. That isn't what was said, however.
Oh, was it?
How do you know that would help you?
I don't.
It's kind of a con game, isn't it?
I don't see how it's a con game.
Really?
Really?
I lie to someone, and I tell them this would be helpful. I don't know if that's true or not. And I present it in such a light that I'm not even making it real clear that this is my belief about me. Neither one of those two things are known. And all that had to be said is, would you give an example? It's kind of a con game, isn't it? It's called manipulation. In other words, you believe that you know what Philip's motives are. Or at least what they ought to be.
Oh.
And so if I can present this so it affects his motives, then I can get him to do this even though he's made it very clear he doesn't want to.
I see what you're saying. I get it. You know what it really...
Now, luckily for me,
you can hear
you
it.
don't know what my motives are.
But you know what also, I think it might also say something about me. Because I chose to, maybe obviously that says something about what my motives are. Not necessarily.
Like what?
To think that maybe I am happy. Because I
Well, this says
in some way said that about you, so it must be
It says
something
a
I
lot
think about
about
me.
you, I know that.
Yeah, which I just got. It's good. But I saw both things, the manipulation and me.
Whereas I think that people learn by doing, not by talking.
Yes.
And so we just sat here and spent a lot of time coming up with, half an hour coming up with some experiments. My suggestion is that you go and try the experiments that people have suggested. And then if it's still not clear, you say, this is what I tried.
Okay.
Here's what happened. And then we can maybe make corrections. But if I'm not even willing to try, if I just want to understand it with the brain, the mind,
That's not doing what you said.
we still don't have a foundation. And not substitute thinking for doing. And for seeing, for observing. So, anything else? Okay, so you have something to do this week? Now, please understand that I really do mean what I say, that it is worthless to continue on without doing the experimentation for myself. And from my point of view, I would be doing great harm by moving on if you haven't experimented with this. Okay? So, if next week we talk about this and no one has done anything, we'll probably sit here and talk about it for a few minutes and then say, have a nice week. Okay? It's not a threat. I just want you to understand that this is what it takes. We want this to become as real a fact to me as gravity is. Even though I've never seen gravity. I don't really understand gravity, although I have a concept of what it does under these very specific conditions. Isn't that right? Now the fact is that if you've ever studied anything about gravity, you know that under different conditions it behaves entirely differently, and all you know about that is as a theory, isn't that right? Because you've only been in these conditions. So I don't even really understand gravity very well, do I? But I take it into account every second of every day without even realizing it. Isn't that right? Because it's real to me. I don't have to think about it very often. Maybe once in a while. But most of the time I really don't. I just take it into account. Isn't that right? I know how much expenditure of muscle energy to exert for a particular situation. Sometimes I'm a little off, but most of the time I estimate pretty good ahead of time, don't I? I mean, that's just this constant taking into account a fact of existence without even seeing that I'm doing it. It's just a part of the way I see things. So I look at something and I estimate its weight, and I say to X, I'm going to need probably about this much energy to get this job done, and I'm often right, and occasionally wrong. I misestimate, isn't it? I think we have funny little things happen. Like, it was lighter than I thought, and it goes flying out of my hands because I put too much force into it. You ever done that with plastic things that look like they're metal? Makes you feel really stupid, doesn't it? But, you know, what do you want? Somebody decided to fake you out. And it works. So what? But the point is, think about how real that is to me. Because I have constant daily experience with it. The four forces are just as real as gravity is, except I never take them into account. And I wonder why this life is kind of cuckoo sometimes. And somebody, and I'm not trying to be offensive to you, but somebody sits here and says, the life takes so much of the attention that I can't do experiments. And yet, why does it take so much of the attention? Because I don't see the way things are, so nothing works out very well, so it's constantly going cuckoo and takes constant attention on my part because I don't see the way things are. So when is this ever going to end if I won't take the time to see things the way they are? And then maybe one day it won't take constant attention. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We need a way out. And the teaching says the way out is to take each of the ideas of the teaching and make them real through experience. Then I start to see the world in a whole new way, and so the way I act makes just as much sense as the way I act around gravity. It's an invisible force that I live with very successfully. Isn't that right? Very successfully. And it's a very powerful force, isn't it? And it's real rough on these bodies, isn't it? I mean, all you have to do is just fall slightly badly, and gravity damages you, isn't that right? It takes no effort at all to get gravity to damage you. You can do it with practically no effort, isn't that right? And yet we live with this extremely powerful force all the time and don't suffer much damage. Now here's an equally powerful force that we live with all the time, but it's invisible to us and it's damaging us constantly. That's what the teaching says. Because we don't deal with the second force of creation properly. And so it constantly damages us. It would be like you imagining that there was no gravity. And then walking around and pretending like that was true. And then wondering why you're so damn beat up. You see? That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So no matter how busy and distracting life is, there might be some value in spending time with these 3 experiments that we came up with and giving them some time in that busy life to see if I can learn to deal with a tremendously powerful force. One of the forces that created the entire universe without it damaging me all the time. Okay? Good. Well, if there's nothing else, then I'm done.
Next Thursday is Thanksgiving.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Thanksgiving is always Thursdays.
Well, I know, yeah.
It's one of those floating day holidays. Okay. That's an interesting fact.
So are we going to meet?
I don't know. It's not my decision.
Are you planning to be here next Thursday?
I have no idea. I didn't even know it was Thanksgiving. Probably. I imagine a bunch of you have plans for Thanksgiving, isn't that right? So,
Yeah, I'll be out of town.
is there another day that you want to do it on, or do you want to wait 2 weeks instead of 1? It's real simple.
Friday.
That means you don't want to come?
I could do, I could do Friday. If everybody want to do Friday, I'd do Friday. I'd rather do Wednesday and have my 4-day weekend.
Yeah, unfortunately, Wednesday is taken.
So,
I got to meet next week. Following week.
Well, what is it?
Yeah, Wednesday night.
Yeah, I just
Next Friday or
Wait.
wait?
just wait.
wait 2 weeks.
Okay. That's what we'll do. Good.